One of the major differences that, in my opinion, between Judaism and Christianity is that Christianity is a religion that is based on belief, while Judaism, for the most part, is a religion that is based on action, on mitzvot. All right? We said na'aseh v'nishma. The first thing we talk about is what we're going to do. Now, what does that mean? Like, belief versus action. So Christianity is a religion that's all about belief. If you believe in Jesus, you're going to heaven. It doesn't matter what you really did before. You're going to heaven. And that's why they send out missionaries, to try to get people to believe. So, you feel bad for the guy that's, some Aborigine in Australia, and there was no missionary that got to him. He could have been this really good guy, visited the sick, comforted the mourners, did all sorts of acts of chesed. But if he asks a Christian, what's his din? They'll say, well, he didn't believe in Jesus, so he's damned to hell. And the converse is true as well. The story that I heard, which is really scary, that after Eichmann was captured by the Mossad and brought to Israel, stood trial, and he was found guilty of death. Israel was going to put him to death, and they allowed the church to send a priest in to administer last rites. This priest goes in and talks to Eichmann, and basically tried to get Eichmann to say that he believes in Jesus. When he came out, he was interviewed and asked what Eichmann said. And he said that Eichmann, refused to go along with anything. I said, okay, great. So someone said, had Eichmann professed his belief in Jesus, what would be his sentences? He'd go straight to heaven without having to spend any time in purgatory. You believe in Jesus, that's it. Then someone had the chutzpah to ask him, what about his 6 million victims? He goes, well, they didn't believe in Jesus. Okay? So it's very strong. Belief, not belief. And Judaism, so you don't have to be Jewish to go to Olam Haba, non-Jew can go to Olam Haba. The 7 mitzvahs, B'nai Noach, are pretty much, are you a good person? Pretty much that's what it comes down to. You can go to Olam Haba. There's Yerushalmi that says it's much stronger. Pasuk in Yirmiyahu, that God is complaining to Yirmiyahu, a Navi, and he says about the Jewish people, Oti azvu v'torati lo shomeru. They have forsaken me, and they've abandoned my Torah. Okay. That's the pasuk. God's complaining to Yirmiyahu, the Jewish people aren't keeping Torah, they've abandoned Kadosh Baruch Hu. Says the Gemara Yerushalmi, halavai. What's halavai? What? What's halavai? If only. I wish, the God says, Oti azvu v'torati shomeru. I wish they would have abandoned me, but they still kept the Torah. What do you see from this? That as long as the Jews will be keeping the Torah, even if it's not because they believe in God, right? Even if it's just lo lishma, strongest possible way, that would be okay. Why? Because the Torah lo lishma ba lishma. Even if you do it for the wrong reasons, our hope is you're doing mitzvahs. For whatever reason, hopefully you'll start to do it for the right reasons. And if so, belief without action is unacceptable. To sit there and say, I believe in God, but it doesn't change who you are, that's unacceptable. Belief has to bring about action. But action without belief, that's okay. That's okay as a starting point. I'm doing mitzvot, and as I said, b'tov lo l'shma ba l'shma. But it's not enough. It's not enough to just do mitzvot. Okay? As we know, we didn't just say na'aseh, we said na'aseh v'nishma. So I do have to try to understand. There are things I must believe in. I can't just, by rote, do mitzvot because my father did it and I'm following in his ways without understanding it. We have to na'aseh v'nishma. We have to try to understand. We do have a belief system. The Rambam even delineated 13 principles of faith. But in Judaism, we don't just analyze our faith. In Judaism, we proclaim our faith daily in our tefillot. Every single time we daven, we're proclaiming our belief. Very often, we're saying things against beliefs that had been prevalent at the time. So anyone know what dualism is? Dualism. Anybody? Dualism, believing in two different gods. Good God and a bad God. Good God and a bad God. Okay? So aside from the obvious Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, right? That there's one God. The first bracha that we say when we start Birkat Kriyat Shema, we say Yotzer Or Borei Choshech. How does it go? Oseh Shalom Uborei Et HaKol. Now it's based on a pasuk, and the pasuk actually says Uborei Ra. We just say it a little nicer, but the idea is God does light and day, good and bad. Everything. There's no such thing as a good God and a bad God. There's God and the devil. It's all from God. So this is stated in the davening in response to the Tzdukim, the Sadducees, who felt there was no such thing as Tchias HaMesim. Second bracha of Shemona Esrei, 5 times we talk about Tchias HaMesim. Right? We state it daily, thrice daily. In response to Christians who believe that we were born with original sin and tainted souls. So we say in the morning, Elokai Neshama. How does it go? Tahoraki. Tahoraki. It's not tainted. We have a pure soul. In response to the Karaites, who felt that you were not allowed to have fire burning on Shabbos, because the pasuk says, "Lo tamaru eish b'chol moshotechem." Can't have fire burning on Shabbos. We, at least Ashkenazim, on Friday night, we say the Mishnah to B'mem Adlikin. We go through, of course, we light candles. We have candles burning on Shabbos. We're stating our belief. In response to those who felt that the only thing you really have to keep are the 10 Commandments, we deleted it from the davening. Okay, you should know, it says in the Mishnayos that in the time of Beit HaMikdash, after Kriyat Shema, the 10 Commandments we stated. But there were people who felt, that's the only thing that's important. So it was removed. So we shouldn't feel that only the 10 Commandments are important. It's for that reason that the Rambam felt he shouldn't stand up in shul. The 10 Commandments are being read. So people shouldn't think this is more important than other commandments. We pray our beliefs. Right? Even have, we said the 13 principles of faith, the Rambam. Anyone know what tefillah that's in? Yigdal. Yigdal. The 13 principles of faith are in Yigdal. We pray our beliefs. Now, if you're an atheist, even if you're an upright, moral individual, you look at this world and you say, well, that's a tragic place. But if you're a believing Jew, so it doesn't matter how dark the period of time you're living in, through prayer we always have hope. It's a very different attitude towards life. Today's Emunah Day. Today's Emunah Day, for some people, it's the most important day of the year. All year long, we deal with the what am I supposed to do, how am I supposed to do it. And today we deal with the why am I doing it at all? Why? Usually we don't ask those questions. So what am I supposed to do? Now's the time to ask why. The Kotzker Rebbe once asked his students, where is God? So of course, mentioned Uncle Moshe this morning, everyone knows, God is here, God is there, God is truly everywhere, right? And that's what they answered. And the Kotzker Rebbe said, God is where you let him in. Emunah Day is if you're going to open up now your brains, your hearts, and let things in. Okay? These are the questions you should be asking. We try to build some sort of program dealing with issues that should be affecting you. And now's the time to ask, why? Can you live a meaningful life without, being religious? Without having a relationship with God? I think yes. I think you can. You can be committed to your family, you can be committed to your community, and you can feel meaning in your life. But I think you're lacking something. I had a conversation with a couple of guys in my shir this past week on this particular idea. And I compared it to, I think it's like, here, let's say someone gives me a smartphone. I'm losing rotary, okay? Now, someone gives me a smartphone. And I'm saying, oh, this is really good. I can make phone calls and I can get phone calls. Oh, Rabbi, you don't know what you can do with it. All right? This isn't just a phone. It's a camera, and it's a flashlight, and it's a GPS, and it's a computer, and it's, you name it, all the different apps that you guys have. And WhatsApp, and I call WhatsApp, and whatever. And all the different things, right? Amazing. I'm going, but it makes calls and gets calls. Okay, that's all I need. No, you don't get it. You're missing out on so much. And that's exactly how I feel when you guys say, I don't need a relationship with God. It's true that you can have a commitment to your family, you can feel. And it's true, my phone, it gets calls and it makes calls. And that's great. But there's so much more. And I think that if you don't have a relationship with God, you're missing out on so much. And that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to make sure that you don't miss out. You don't miss out on such an important part to your life. We say in the davening on Shabbos, Pasuk in Tehillim, Tamu'u uru'u ki tov Hashem. Taste and see how great God is. Sometimes Judaism has to be experienced first. And only afterwards, then you can see, you could come to understand. Right? Sometimes you need to, experience a Kol Nidra. One of the great Jewish philosophers, Franz Rosenzweig, became religious because he went into an Orthodox shul on Yom Kippur. It was the experience of being in an Orthodox shul on Yom Kippur that changed him. Sometimes a Leil HaSeder. You've seen a Leil HaSeder. Shabbos. Shabbos with a family sitting around, not rushing anywhere. No one has phones. People talking to each other, Divrei Torah, singing. Changes people. Changes people. I had a student that told me I felt sad for him. He said, Friday night meal is no different than a Tuesday night meal in my house. It's over in 20 minutes. The only difference is my father sloshed and he's making passes at my mom. That's a little awkward. Other than that, there's no difference. And that's very sad. That's very sad. Sean Beck guys are going to hear Uri Zohar later today. It's a story that I heard. You can ask him if it's true. The story that I heard is as follows. Uri Zohar was the most famous entertainer in Israel. Okay, he was the star of all these movies. He had his own TV show. He was an extremely, extremely famous Israeli celebrity here in Israel. And he once met Rabbi Zilberman's. You know the Zilberman's school that's down there that, we pass by when we go out towards Shar Tzion, all those kids running around. So Rabbi Zilberman himself has now passed away. He's the son that's running the school. This is, the person who started Rabbi Zilberman's. He once met him, and he said to him, I got lots of questions. Rabbi Zilberman said, I have answers to all your questions. So Uri Zohar said, well, when can we talk? He said, come to me for Shabbos. So Uri Zohar, he was living in Tel Aviv. He came, he booked a room in a hotel in Yerushalayim, and he walked to the old city to spend Shabbos with Rabbi Zilberman to ask him all his questions. Now, we only know what happened because it happened later. Many years later. See, afterwards, Uri Zohar sort of left. No one knew what happened. He disappeared. He went to a yeshiva. And he learned for years. And then he comes out. He's still doing his TV shows. But all of a sudden now he's doing some TV show and he's wearing a yarmulke. People looking at him. And his tzitzis are out. And he just leaves everything altogether. He goes off to yeshiva, comes back later, and he's like some Haredi guy. And unfortunately, terrorism, alive and present today, was going on also since the inception of the state and before. And there was one terrorist act where a mother and her children, I don't know how many, one or two, were killed in some attack on a bus. And it was Rabbi Zilberman's daughter and grandchildren. And he came to be Menachem Avo. And no one knew anything about this. So he came, he went one day, okay, fine, there was second day, third day, he stayed there all. So then people started asking, and that's when he tells the whole story. Now we go back. He went for that Shabbos at the Zilberman's house, and he was blown away just by looking at the family. He said, my kids don't respect me. All right? Every generation thinks they know more than the previous generation. There's no communication. And I'm looking at your family. Everyone loves each other. Everyone gets along with each other. There's so much honor for each other. Everyone's helping. And I just said, this is what I want. So it had nothing to do with questions or answers. Then he started learning. But it was the experience of a Shabbos, of a Friday night meal. Sometimes that happens here as well. Right? I know me personally. We didn't sing any Zmiros in my house until I came back from yeshiva. Right? You come here, you start learning Zmiros, and it makes your Shabbos meal so different. Same Divrei Torah makes your Shabbos meal so different. For Uri Zohar, seeing what a family could be like, changed him. It changed him. Then he went off to yeshiva. Now, in yeshiva, he started learning. So I read an article that said, what was the thing that sealed it for him? The Vilna Gaon's parish on the beginning of Shir Hashirim. There's some pasuk there in the beginning of Shir Hashirim, and the Vilna Gaon shows how everything fits together. The Torah Shulchan, with the gematria, with each thing representing, and he was blown away. That's 10 different lessons from this one pasuk. And he said, okay, this obviously makes total sense. And I felt the same way. Now, I never learned that parish. I read about it. I haven't found this parish yet. But when I came to yeshiva, the same thing. I was under the impression, going through high school, that you had a bunch of rabbis that made up things primarily to make me miserable. And then you come to yeshiva and you start learning Gemara, because of course in high school I just studied the Testament, didn't learn Gemara. And now you're learning, you see how everything works together. This halach is actually based on a Gemara, it's based on a Mishnah, it's based on Sukkim, and ways of understanding it. And wow, there's a rhyme and a reason to everything. And it's the learning that brought me closer. Now, what do you need to start? You need an experience. Shabbos, the Leila Seder, the Kol Nidre, davening yeshiva. Sometimes, you come here and hear of cats. You hear of cats and you see, wow, he's like crying. I guess he actually understands what he's saying. A little different than the cantors, we're used to. And this experience changes you. It changes you. And then you have to learn. And that's what we're doing this year. That's what we're doing. For many people, this is the last year you'll have to just immerse yourself in learning, in spiritual growth. But that's what we need to do. There's a story that I read about a group of guys living in Russia during the Enlightenment. And the Enlightenment now is spreading throughout Europe, and there's a bunch of Jews that are ready to chuck their religion and go off to university. And look, this semester, they're not going to be going in until the fall, so they send one of their friends off to Volozhin. Volozhin Yeshiva was the flagship yeshiva in Europe, and he was sent off. He was sent off there, representative of his friends, to see is there anything to religion before we basically forsake it. And he went into Volozhin and he threw himself into it, and he learned. And he came back Pesach vacation, and they said, "No, how was it? Amazing. Did you come up with answers to all of our questions?" And he said, "No. But you know what? The questions don't bother me so much anymore." And for some people, that's enough. For some people, just immersing yourself in learning is sufficient. As long as you keep learning, so Rabbeinu saying, who has questions? Rabbeinu was talking to my shir earlier this morning, right? He's talking to Noah, and he was saying, questions, we have questions, right? So, there's an idea. Vilna Gaon says this in the Haggadah. If you pay attention when the Rasha asks a question, and then the answer that is given is not to the Rasha. Okay, if you look at, when we get up to the Haggadah, you take a look. The Rasha makes a statement, and now we talk to all the other kids at the table. And we start saying, if he would have been there, he would have been killed in Makos Choshev. We're not talking to him. Why are we not talking to him? Because he's not listening. He's not listening. We all know that. We were in high school and we asked questions. Sometimes you ask questions because you want to know the answer. Sometimes we ask questions to challenge. It's ridiculous. You ask this question, seemingly, and then while the teacher explaining it, busy talking to your friend because you're not interested in the answer. You just wanted to poke fun. And that's what the Rosh is doing there. In fact, if you look at the Psukim, all of the other sons, it says, Yish'al bincha. By the Rosh it says, Va'amarta. He just says, he states it. He's not asking. He's stating it. And therefore we don't even ask. We don't respond. Says the Chavetz Chaim, because for an Apikoros, there are no answers. But for a Maimon, a believer, there are no questions. Now Rabbeinu is a Maimon. So Rabbeinu is telling you this morning. Says there's ups and downs. That's part of being a human being. And do we have answers? No. Says Rabbeinu, so what? If I have Emunah, I'm not going to be shaken by the fact that now I have this hiccup along the way. Sometimes it's a small thing, sometimes it's a huge thing. But for a Maimon, that's what Rabbeinu is trying to tell you, there are no questions. And that works for some, but not for everyone. And that's why we have Emunah Day, for those that's not enough. In my opinion, there's 4 kinds of Jews. 4 kinds of Jews. The first kind, this is the Jew because his stupid mother and your stupid mother. And this guy, he's got no Jewish identity. It was an accident of birth. Okay? He was born to a Jewish mother and therefore he's Jewish. But he has 0 Jewish identity. He has no Jewish future. And unfortunately, that's a large percentage of the world's Jewish population. 0 Jewish identity. It's not shocking when they intermarry, it's almost shocking when they do. When they marry, someone from the Jewish religion. Why? They don't view themselves being Jewish, it just happens to be they fell in love with a Jewish girl. Next group of Jews, I call them cultural Jews. Identifies as being Jewish. Okay? Could be, I don't know, he likes bagels and lox, matzo balls. Lights the menorah because his colleagues have a Christmas tree. It's the holiday season, so he wants to do something. Maybe he sings a different Hanukkah song every year. This is a cultural Jew. Maybe he gives money to the UGA, maybe he doesn't. Goes to his Reform temple on the high holidays. Doesn't feel any obligations as a Jew. The Torah is not obligating him to do anything. Even tzedakah. Jews give tzedakah more readily than non-Jews, but already at this point, his tzedakah is not even going to Jewish causes anymore. Museums or general things. He's giving, but he doesn't necessarily feel like that. It's not a big deal. He doesn't necessarily feel connected to the state of Israel. Often some of the biggest critics of Israel's policies are Jews. And he feels that Judaism is the same as humanism. That's it, be a good person. You don't have to do anything more than that. Shlomo Carlebach used to go around to universities and try to find Jews on campus to talk to, try to makariv them. And he tells a story. He said he went to, he'd ask, what religion are you? And the Christian would say he's Christian, and the Muslim would say Muslim, and the Jew would always say, I'm a human being. Said, you knew who to talk to. Let's talk. Right? These people feel that I don't have any obligation. I remember we were in a hotel for Pesach in Netanya. It was a long time ago, it's like 15 years ago. And my youngest son, Ron, was telling me, he was hanging out with this irreligious Israeli kid there. And he said, he's Chiloni, that's like, irreligious Israeli. And that's why he doesn't have to keep Shabbos. I explained to him that that's just not true. That's what he thinks, but that's not true. He has to keep Shabbos like we have to keep Shabbos. He just thinks he doesn't have to keep Shabbos. Right? We were in the United States like 20 years ago, and I was signing my kids up for a soccer league. This was when we were in Highland Park, New Jersey. Okay? And there was a choice. There was 2 leagues, one on Saturday, one on Sunday. So I said, write down which league you want to be in and why. So I wrote down Sunday, and I wrote Jewish. Not Orthodox Jewish, Jewish. Every Jew really shouldn't, be playing soccer on Shabbos. So I just wrote down Jewish, because that's what it comes down to. Jews have to keep Shabbos. A lot of Jews don't realize that. These are what I call the cultural Jews. And you have the third category. Third category will say the Shomrei mitzvahs. Keep mitzvahs, or maybe Orthodox. I don't know. Now this is a very broad topic, comes in all shapes and sizes. But give you an example. Many, many years ago, I taught in Robin Deer's Girls' Home. A long time ago. And I was teaching Hilchos Shabbos, and we got into a conversation about why we do things, and it came down to, one of the girls said, Rabbi, what is your definition of orthodoxy? My response was, orthodoxy is we put the Shulchan Aruch up on a pedestal from where we fall short. We have to try to do everything in the Shulchan Aruch, but we all mess up. But that's the goal. But once we rip pages out of the Shulchan Aruch, once we use whiteout, on Sukkim and the Torah, then we're not Orthodox. So one girl went immediately from the class, called her father in New York, said, my rabbi said, we're not Orthodox. He called the head of the school, head of the school put me, but he had my back and that was fine. But Orthodox means we're trying to do everything. Everyone messes up, but we try to do everything. So the person who's shomer mitzvah, for the most part, keeps mitzvot. He knows what he's supposed to do. Respects those who do the right thing. Some cases, not necessarily so from though. Like, unfortunately, I ask this every year. I say, we all know guys in our high school class who got 100 on the Hilchos Shabbos test, but they themselves were Machal Shabbos. And almost every year, one guy said, that was me. All right, so intellectually, we know what to do, but it doesn't necessarily always translate into action. I had a student, and some of the guys in my shir heard me say this, who last year told me, Rabbi, you can't count me for a minyan at Mincha. I'm an Abikaris. Right? Now this guy, he was really bright. He was the brightest guy in my shir, one of the brightest guys in the yeshiva. And he enjoyed learning. He enjoyed learning. But he didn't believe in anything. So he's saying, you can't count me for a minyan. He knew enough to tell me. He said, listen, I'm telling you, you can't count me for a minyan. Asked Rabbeinu what to do, whatever. In the end, the guy became religious, Baruch Hashem. But we have people that sometimes do mitzvot for social reasons. There are people in our communities in Chutz La'aretz that keep mitzvot for social reasons. Because their friends are keeping Shabbos or Kashrus, they sort of do the same thing, because it would sort of be weird if they didn't, because their friends would think they're strange if they had, chametz in their house on Pesach. So for social reasons, they offer intellectual reasons. This guy liked learning. There's a crazy story that is told about a guy in yeshiva in Radin. Radin was the yeshiva of the Chafetz Chaim. It's in Russia. And Chafetz Chaim had this amazing yeshiva, right? A lot of amazing students went to the yeshiva. But not everyone in every yeshiva is always great. So there was one guy who would listen to the Chafetz Chaim give a shir on Friday night, and he'd go back to his dorm room and write it up. He'd write down the shir. He really enjoyed the shir. He didn't want to forget it. So he went back to his room, he wrote it up. And his roommate said, what the heck are you doing? He said, I'll get the shir. Tried to even listen, it didn't work. So he went and told the Chafetz Chaim. The Chafetz Chaim called him in to his office, and he took the guy's hand in his hands, and he said one word. He said, Shabbos. And then he said it a few more times, and he started to cry. And not little, just tears coming down. Shabbos. And the guy changed. Shabbos meant so much to the Chafetz Chaim, he changed. Now, there's a rabbi in Efrat, Rabbi Riskin, and I was reading an article that he wrote, and he said he once said this in Miami Beach. In the 70s, he was once in Miami Beach, he was Scotland residence, and he said this, and some old man stood up and said, that's me. That was me. Changed. We have people that are in our communities that are somewhat shomer mitzvah, and maybe not so shomer mitzvah. Now go to the fourth category. That's where we should really get to. I was teaching in Berea High School once, in Elizabeth, New Jersey. And there was a rabbi, Ray Wasserman. And I don't remember now if I came in, he had the class before me and I came in, or he came in after me. But I remember he says to me in front of the students, do you consider yourself religious? And I said, that's a good question, I'm not so sure. Which, all the girls thought was very odd, because I'm the rabbi teaching in the yeshiva, in the girls' school. And I said, I do consider myself to be shomer mitzvot. I try to do all the mitzvot, that pedestal Shulchan Aruch thing. But to me, someone who's religious is someone who is God-centered, who thinks of God all the time. And if you're not thinking of God all the time, there's something wrong. Now, some of us, many of us, don't even think of God when we daven to God. A whole other thing. But a religious Jew should be thinking about God all the time. And sometimes I felt that I think I just do mitzvah because that's what I'm supposed to do. That's what I was taught. It's a routine. And if I'm not really thinking about God, then I don't know how religious I am. Not just the what, but the why. Abram Joshua Heschel said about the Jewish people that we are messengers who forgot the message. God chose us. Do we know what we're supposed to be doing? What's the message that we're supposed to be passing on? What must I believe? The Gemara talks about people who are Tanei Emunah, Kitnei Emunah, ye of little faith. Right? Which means that we're supposed to strive to be Gdolim Emunah, to grow in our Emunah. So what is it that we're supposed to believe? I would state our belief system in one line. Birchat Torah that we make in the morning. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol am, v'natan lanu et Torato, Baruch atah Hashem v'tein Torah. What am I saying in that? I believe that God revealed His Torah to Am Yisrael. That's what I have to believe. That encompasses everything I have to believe. Now, first of all, the bracha. Let's look at the bracha. There's a Gemara, B'Metzia, one in B'Metzia, Daf Pei Hey, that says that the second Beis Hamikdash is destroyed because we didn't say Birchas Torah. Didn't say Birchas Torah. What does that mean? You had a whole bunch of people learning Torah. That wasn't good enough. They didn't say Birchas Torah. So what was lacking? What's so bad about it? You didn't say Birchas Torah. I mean, if I pick up the lulav and I don't make the bracha, I'm still a kind of mitzvah. So I learned I didn't make the bracha. It's such a big thing with destroying the Beis Hamikdash because I didn't make a Birchas Torah. Oh, so the Ran says that I treat it as an intellectual exercise, and that's certainly the way we view Torah in high school. All right, in high school I have a Chumash test and I have a history test. You know, I got a paper I have to do here. I got a test in Gemara, and it's just a subject. And if that's all it is, so then that's a problem. And that's one view, and it's definitely very true. But I want to go further. I think another one of the problems is God gave us the Torah. We forget the fact that we're unique. The sin was the not recognizing how significant the Jewish people are. The Torah is the constitution for us as individuals. The Torah is the constitution for us as a nation. Therefore, we should have pride that we were chosen. Unfortunately, you ask the average guy, first day of Shana Aleph, if he prefer to be Jewish, I'd say a good percentage of guys coming into yeshiva. I'm not saying it's the majority, but it's certainly not a small minority would say, I prefer not to be Jewish. These are guys that went to 12 years of yeshiva. Right? I prefer not to be Jewish. It's easier not to be Jewish. There's no pride in being Jewish. And this, I think, is the problem. We have to recognize, we'll break up the bracha into three parts. Baruch atah Hashem. We have to recognize God. I have to recognize that God created, sustains, and supervises the world. Every single thing that's going on, globally and for me as an individual. God's involved in my life. We just finished Hanukkah. The lesson to learn from Hanukkah is Hashkachat Hashem. God's involvement in our lives. Not just when it's a nes nigla, some overt miracle, but all these little miracles. Rabbeinu was talking about this is a miracle, this is a miracle. We have to recognize the miracles in our lives. Recognize the Kadosh Baruch Hu in my life, all along the way. That's what it means. Baruch atah Hashem. I have to recognize God. And then we say what? Asher bachar banu mikol am. God chose us. The Jewish people were chosen. Now, some people think, oh, chosen is just like an obligation. God didn't just say, ini, mini, mani, mo. He chose because he thinks we're special people. Now, Rabbi Yaakov Emden said the greatest proof of God's existence in the world is the fact that Jewish people still exist. Against all the odds, Jewish people are still here. God chose us. We're His people. Why did He choose us? There's a commentator called the Akedas Yitzhak, Rabbi Yitzhak Araman, and he said that the original plan was not to have a Jewish people. The original plan is everyone should just be monotheists. Everyone should believe in God. But it started going downhill from Adam till Noah. God destroyed the world, started all over, reset button. Noah. And again, going downhill, downhill, downhill. Then what happened? One last chance. Gives the entire world a feeling of unity. And you know what they did with that feeling of unity? They built the Tower of Babel to rebel against God. And God said, okay, now I'm changing the plan. We're going to go to one person who was alive at that time, Avram Avinu, and he's going to be the role model for the rest of humanity. Avram and his family were chosen to be the role models for the rest of civilization. And that's who we are. We should be proud of that fact. We were chosen by God to be the role models for the world. And what did He do? He gave us His Torah. The Torah is God's, autobiography. God is telling us, this is how you know me, and this is how I'm telling you should live your life. The Torah is a manual written by the Creator of the world. And He's saying, this is the best way for you to live your life. I'm telling you, I know I created the world. You want to have the most meaningful life? Follow these rules. God, Torah, and Israel. These are the three things that we have to believe in. This is what we have to believe. This is what Emunah is all about. Emunah, however, has to be translated into action. Emunah is from the word uman. Uman is like a craftsman. But this has to be translated to action. If Emunah just stays in your heart, I believe, but it doesn't change who you are, then you don't really believe. It has to change who you are. We have to see God in our lives. All along the way, ups and downs. Yosef Atzadik. Yosef Atzadik goes down to Mitzrayim. He's sold by his brothers. I mean, we read the story, you know the story, but there's no way Yosef, walking off to his brothers, thought that they wanted to kill him and that they were going to sell him into slavery in the end. He's shocked by it. Does he lose his faith? No. He's sold to become a slave. Does he lose his faith? No. He's accused of a crime he didn't believe in, that he didn't commit. He's thrown into jail. Does he lose his faith? No. Throughout everything, Yosef keeps his faith. Emunah means even through the tough times. I'm going to end with one idea that I mentioned to my shir last week during Hanukkah. On Hanukkah, we know that the Greeks made the gzerot against Jewish people. They couldn't celebrate Rosh Chodesh and Bris Milah and Shabbos. Okay? And in the shir, we talked about the significance of each one making the Jewish people unique, and this is why the gzerot were made by the Greeks. But we have to understand that someone must be telling the Greeks about it. Who was giving the Greeks this information? So we know there were Hellenized Jews. There were Jews that assimilated and wanted all the Jews to assimilate. And they're the ones that were feeding the Greeks. This is what you should make the decree upon. Make the decree upon these things, and it'll break their individuality, their Jewish identity. So now we have a question on the miracle of the oil. The Greeks went out of their way to defile all the oil. Why did they destroy all the oil? Why don't you just take all the oil and destroy it, pour it onto the floor? Why did they just defile it? So I think the idea could be as follows. You defile the oil. Now, if everyone's tummy, so I'm sure some of you learned over Hanukkah, there's an idea, Tumah Hutra B'tzibur. If everyone's tummy, I can bring it tummy. What did the Greeks actually accomplish? Nothing. Could have brought it tummy, right? And this is exactly what the Hirschhorn fought against. What were the Hellenized Jews trying to create? Something that unfortunately we see in our communities in Chutz La'aretz. Turning a b'di'evet into a lechatchila. B'di'evet Tumah Hutra B'Tzibur. B'diavad, I can use the Tamei oil, and that'll be fine. It's not lechatchila, but it's okay. And the Chashmonim fought against that. And we see that so often. How many of us say, well, b'diavad, I read somewhere that it's enough in Sukkot Zimmer to say, Baruch Shemer Ashrei Nishtabach. Right? If you're really late. So then why say anything else anyway? If I can just get away with Baruch Shemer Ashrei Nishtabach, well then that's what I'll do. If b'diavad, it's, I don't know, let's see what else. Oh, I could be Yotze, learning day and night, by saying Kriyat Shema, Shachris and Ma'ariv. Amen. Good. Kriyat Shema, Shachris and Ma'ariv. Why learn anything more than that? Why go for anything more? B'diavad, that's okay. Right? I could put my television on a timer. I'm not turning it on. I have the timer setting it. And then I can go and watch the ball game. Because I didn't do any Chilul Shabbos. I set the whole thing on a timer. That's okay. Or Grama, right? I know that there are people they can set in a Grama way. At least there used to be a phone when I lived in Teaneck, New Jersey. So there was a phone in the rabbi's office when the doctors had beepers, but no one yet had cell phones. So they had to make a phone call. They go into the rabbi's office and they use this phone. It was called a Grama phone. And it worked on Grama, and therefore, you were able to use the... So now, what are they doing? All the talk in America? Some Shabbos app. So you'll be able to have your phones on Shabbos. Isn't that great? We'll work out such a way in a Grama that you can have your phones on. You're turning b'diavad into l'chadchilas. You're trying to look for every last loophole and say, well, in an extreme case, this is okay. Let's make it l'chadchila. Clearly, that's not what God wants from us. Kadosh and Tiyuv, the Ramban, is don't just technically do what's right, but do what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants from us. I tell my shir all the time, Kenny Hirschhorn, I do not do mitzvot because I'm scared about burning in hell. And I don't do mitzvot because I'm looking to get rewarded in heaven. It's not about the reward for me. Okay? I told my shir when they came for Shabbos that I once had a student that asked me, if you could die now and go straight to the highest place in heaven, would you want to die now? I said, no. He said, isn't it all about getting to the highest place in heaven? I said, not for me. Okay? Aside from the fact that I feel I have responsibility to my family, my friends, my students, I said, good for me. I don't think that's what living as a Jew is all about. I don't think it's just about trying to rack up points. I view my keeping mitzvah like trying to give my parents nachas. My parents have been great to me, gave me my life, gave me everything, took care of me. And whenever I can, I try to give them nachas. And that's what I feel with God. God's been great to me. He's done so much for me. And He tells me, you know what gives me nachas? Follow my rules. So I'm going to try to follow His rules. Like your mother, make your mother happy. If you, set the table before she gets home, clean up your room, go pick up stuff from the dry cleaners. You know what makes her happy? Go and do it. And that's it. I know what makes God happy. He told me what makes Him happy. I try to give Him nachas. And that's what I think Emunah comes down to. If I have Emunah that there is a God and He gave the Torah to Israel, so I try to live my life that way. And that's what we're hoping that you guys get to. If you're not already there, that's what we're trying to do. I thank you for your attention.